I so wish I were there in person to celebrate Dana's life with all of you who loved her so much. Nevertheless, I'm incredibly honored to have been asked to share my thoughts and memories of this amazing woman. I was going to start out by saying that Dana was my best friend, but that isn't true. Dana is my best friend. She will always be my best friend because Dana is irreplaceable. I first met Dana in the summer of 1996 at a Word Alive Church outing at Brush Creek Park. We started talking and spent the rest of the afternoon together. From the very start, it felt as if we had known each other our whole lives. In fact, frequently when we were out together, people would ask if we were sisters. Aside from the fact that we both had dark hair, we looked nothing alike. So I believe that our bond and connection was obvious even to outsiders. During that first encounter, I mentioned to Dana that I had a doctor appointment the next day. I was pregnant with my second son, and she immediately offered to babysit my older son while I went to the appointment. That was my first experience with the thoughtful and generous nature that anybody who was blessed to have Dana in their life knew very well. 8 years ago, I told Dana that Mike and I were going to get married at the courthouse in a few days. Without any hesitation, she and Jason drove 8 hours with Abby, who was only a year and a half old, to stand up for us at our marriage ceremony, even though immediately afterward they had to turn around and drive back home. But the thing about Dana was that she didn't do that because we were best friends. Dana would have done that for anybody. Her heart and her home were always open to all her friends. It was a rare day that she didn't have a visitor at some point, and inviting people over for dinner was a regular occurrence. And it didn't matter if it was the tiny apartment she lived in on College Hill or the beautiful house that she built with Jason. It didn't matter whether she had cleaned and scrubbed that day or if she had gotten behind on the housework. It didn't matter if she was having hot dogs for dinner or filet mignon. You are always welcome, and not just guests of the human variety. Once my parents and I were having dinner at her house, and they brought their dog Molly, who was served the same meatballs that we were having. At the beginning of our friendship, Dana had Cassie and Jenna, and I had 2 sons, and a couple of years later, another. Our children grew up together more like cousins than just friends. My children to this day call her Aunt Dana, just as her girls call me Aunt Karen. Dana was the most amazing mother and loved her girls more than anything in the world. I was always in awe of her patience and how she cared for Cassie and Jenna as a single mother without ever seeming to need a break, even though I'm sure she did. I loved to brag about Dana because her story was incredible and so inspirational. When I met her, she was a single mother with 2 very young daughters. She put herself through school and became a college graduate. She became a beloved teacher, the kind that everybody still remembers and keeps in touch with long after they graduate. She married the man of her dreams, and she did all this without neglecting or putting aside even a little bit her family, her friendships, or her spiritual life. Dana and I both went on to have 2 babies well into our 40s. Even though I was living out of state by then, this brought us even closer as we commiserated over being mistaken for our babies' grandmothers. Well, I was mistaken for my baby's grandmothers. I always suspected that Dana just pretended she was to make me feel better. I was once again awed by the love that she poured out without restraint to Abby and Josie and Cassie and Jenna, and so blessed to see how it multiplied through the love her girls all had for each other. One of the things I missed most about Dana is her sense of humor. As you all know, Dana was so much fun to be with. I so miss laughing with her until we couldn't breathe or speak, and nobody around us having a clue what was so funny, but usually unable to help but laugh along with us. I remember one of the first times we ever went out, just the 2 of us. almost everything we did was with our kids. But one day we went Christmas shopping without them. We were in my van heading to Pittsburgh when we suddenly realized we had been driving for nearly an hour with a Sesame Street children's song cassette playing. A cassette, that tells you how old I am. Once we realized, though, we never turned it off. We turned it up and sang right along with it. We had a joke in my family that if you lived anywhere near the Pittsburgh area, you either knew Dana or even more likely you were related to her. We realized we had underestimated that scope the day my parents took her to a Seawolves minor league baseball game in Erie. Shortly after arriving, Dana turned around and waved to some people a few rows behind them. My dad asked her, "Dana, who could you possibly know at an Erie Seawolves game?" And Dana replied, "That was my cousin." Not a day goes by that I don't think about Dana. And I very often still almost go to text or call her when I want to tell her something or something happens that I know she would find hilarious. We used to sign cards and letters to each other with the acronym BTSD FITWWW, which stood for bestest, truest, sweetest, dearest friend in the whole wide world. One of my favorite possessions is a framed photo of Dana and me at her wedding, and she had the frame inscribed with those words. More than 2 years later, my heart is still broken, and some days the pain feels as fresh as the day that I got the call from Jenna that Dana was gone. Meeting Maven and Stormy was bittersweet. I'm so thankful that Cassie and Jenna allow me to be a part of these beautiful girls' lives. But I grieve that they're deprived of the amazing woman that is their grandmother. I miss my best friend more than words can say. But Dana was a woman of great faith, and I take comfort from 1 Thessalonians 4:13. Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind, who have no hope. I know that someday I will see Dana again. And as one of my favorite songs by Matthew West says, "When the curtain falls down on me, I will be free." Dana is free now, free from all the pain and suffering she experienced at the end, and we can only imagine the peace and joy that she has with her Savior now. Until we're together again, I love and miss you, my bestest, truest, sweetest, dearest friend in the whole wide world.